Hi, friends. Christopher Golden here. Um, at the request of Sadie Hartman, aka Mother Horror, for her Celebrate Horror 2021, I got the permission from my publisher, St. Martin's Press, to read the first few pages, the opening brief scene of Road of Bones. This was the first advanced reading copy, which won't be out until January of 2022, but Sadie wanted me to read this bit to you anyway. So here goes. Teague snapped awake behind the wheel and hit the brakes, but the tires found only ice. Prentice screamed as they slid across rutted permafrost. Teague turned into the skid and tapped the accelerator, heart thundering, as he tried to get the treads to grip the road. He looked past the guardrail at snow-caked treetops, mountains in the distance. The drop off the edge would kill them, but at least it would be faster than freezing to death on the Colima Highway. The tires caught. Teague gave the wheel a nudge, turned away from the drop, but momentum slammed them into the guardrail. With a crump of broken metal, the truck broke through, tilted toward the drop, and Teague bellowed in fear as he floored it. Metal shrieked as the broken guardrail dug into the UAZ's side panel, but the truck leapt forward. Veins pulsed at his temples as he pumped the brake. He dropped the UAZ into park, killed the engine, and stumbled out of the truck on an adrenaline high that made him want to roar. Instead, he dropped to his knees and leaned over the guardrail, sucking in breath after breath of frigid air. The view might have been spectacular, but the drop would have killed them. 30 feet to his left, a small section of the guardrail had been punched through, and another dozen feet of it was now bent and mangled, all from the impact of the truck. How he had kept them on the road, he had no idea. Teague took another deep breath, mostly to prevent himself from puking up the sugadai he'd had for lunch. A door slammed. Boots crunched on the snow. Teague heard his name being called, but he hadn't finished combating his nausea quite yet. The cold helped. Icy air seared his lungs and stung his exposed skin. His breath fogged in front of him. The only sounds were the wind and his pounding heart and the ticking of the rapidly cooling engine. And that voice. Prentice. "The fuck are you doing?" he barely heard. Prentice shoved him with a boot, shouted his name. Teague grabbed the guardrail to keep from toppling sideways onto the snow, his head clearing at last. He turned to glare at Prentice, saw the fury and fear on his friend's face, and knew he had to get on his feet. "Keys, Teague," Prentice snapped. "Give me the goddamn keys." Just past him, Teague saw the side of the once orange UAZ Expedition, now dented and scraped, the metal perforated in two spots as bare-bones model the metal perforated in two spots, as if the broken guardrail had clawed at the truck. The thing might be a bare-bones model, but it had been enough to keep them alive. "Teague!" Prentice barked. He thrust out his hand, palm up. At last, the word keys registered in his brain. Teague launched himself from the ground, rushing to the open driver's door. He'd left the keys in the ignition, but Prentice had naturally assumed otherwise. Teague reached in, turned the key, and the engine hummed and clicked, groaning, trying to turn over. The cold had seeped in already. Fuck! Prentice grabbed Teague's jacket from behind and shunted him aside. He climbed into the driver's seat, tapped the accelerator, foot on the brake, and tried the ignition himself. It coughed, but didn't catch. From behind the steering wheel, Prentice turned to stare at Teague, eyes wide. "Felix, what the fuck did you do?" Teague wanted to pitch him over the guardrail. Most days he and Prentice were close friends, maybe best friends, but as colleagues they spent a lot of time virtually on top of one another, often in close spaces or on dangerous terrain. Prentice might be a much larger man, but Teague had never let himself be bullied, not by anyone. Of course, most of the time he didn't have it coming. Today, maybe he did. "Try it again!" "I don't want to flood it," Prentice said. He might be angry, but his eyes were bright with the fear of a dog and the lights of an oncoming car. "Start the fucking truck!" Prentice turned the key. The engine coughed again, started to grind, and the floor dropped out of Teague's stomach. He loved his work, but he didn't want to die for it. The engine caught, growled to life, and left Teague and Prentice staring at each other, relieved but still amped up. "You fell asleep behind the wheel," Prentice said, his voice only a rasp above the rumble of the engine. Teague exhaled, his body finally registering just how cold he was. Even with all his layers, he felt it in his bones. His exposed face stung as if with sunburn, but he knew this feeling, understood it was just the brutal cold. Clouds hid what passed for daylight in Siberia in the winter. The display in the truck had read 30 below zero Celsius, and it would get much colder in mid-afternoon when the sun went down. Even now, that sting would turn into frostbite in 10 minutes or so, if they stayed out there on the road and he left his face uncovered. He reminded himself not to face the elements without pulling on his balaclava. Growing up, he just called those things ski masks, but Prentice always corrected him. 1970s bank robbers wore ski masks, apparently, while secret agents and assassins wore balaclavas. As if he needed Jack Prentice to teach him how to be cool. Okay, maybe he did. "Hey," Prentice said, reaching out of the truck with his boot and nudging Teague with it. "You fell asleep behind the wheel." Teague couldn't deny it. He'd almost killed them, twice, first hitting the guardrail, then turning off the engine. "I'm wide awake now," he said. "You think I'm going to let you drive after that?" Prentice asked. He rubbed a glove across his graying beard. "Jesus Christ, how did you convince me to come here?" Teague ignored the second question. "Look at the road and tell me you want to drive, and I'll happily take a nap in the passenger seat." Prentice exhaled. He turned up the heat, staring out the windshield at the road ahead of them. After a moment, he slid over without a word, and Teague climbed up onto the driver's seat. He yanked the door shut, put the UAZ in drive, and started once more along the road of bones. "Don't fall asleep," Prentice said. Teague forced a smile. "Don't bore me to death, and I'll stay awake." And that's it, just the opening few pages of Road of Bones, coming in January 2022. And thanks for the invitation, Sadie. I hope everyone's having a good day.